All right, I think we'll give it just another minute here. I think we have most of our breakout room. I think we're waiting for one more person, so we'll just give it one more minute. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. If I'm looking at our list for our breakout room, it looks like Shannon Conlon hasn't joined us yet, but it looks like everyone else is here in attendance. So appreciate everyone jumping on. For the sake of time, just to kind of outline this a little bit, it looks like we have 20 minutes. If Shannon joins, there's 8 of us. So it's going to break out to about 2.5 minutes each. So pretty short amount of time here to cover what we're attempting to cover. So we'll kind of jump right into it. There really are, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to Marco, who's going to act as our scribe and take notes. Certainly, if anyone else take notes and wants to share them, that's great as well. I'll try to take some notes too. So we have 2 main questions that they would like us to ponder and share for each person. So we will just kind of go through the group. So question number 1 is, based on the first 3 meetings in your background, what do you believe the problems and issues are related to the student debt that require change? And then based on what we identify, we'll kind of circle back in the second question and talk about problems and solutions and those type of things that we think we can tackle. So we'll start with that first question again. Based on the 3 meetings in your background, what do we believe the problems are that require change? So I don't know if we have anyone wants to volunteer to go first.
I'll go first. Why not? So can you hear me? You guys can hear me okay? Good. In terms of problem, I think obviously education, as we've been hearing, is an issue in terms of students not understanding kind of what they're getting into in terms of the student debt issue in particular. I have 2 kids, 23 and 19, have gone through the process, and I would tell you, so I'm the banker of the group. So just so you guys know, even for me as the banker of the group, it's a kind of a it's a process that's somewhat confusing. So I know I only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to just make it brief. So I think education is probably the first one. Obviously the process is just complicated, and somehow we've got to simplify that process for kids and families as well. So I think that's the other part of it. And then, the overall cost of education too just has to somehow be addressed. I don't know how we could do that, but to me, those are the big 3.
It take me only a minute or so. I'm your legislator in this group, and I don't have that banking background, of course, but I certainly have gone through this with my children, who are now 30 and 28, soon to be 28. And I remember how confusing it was. So I really appreciate that you say that. To me, it even feels like a trap to some degree. It's confusing. You feel like you have to do this. You have to go through this. It's for your kids' future. And then in the end, here you are with a lot of surprises by the time they get through their 4 years or whatever it takes, and they're stuck with a lot of surprises. So I feel I just commented with the last speaker with Seth, that I feel a little naive, in fact, that so many of the things you expect to trust are out there are not. And I think that that Bill of Rights is probably something we really have to be seriously considering, among other things. That's that's my take on it so far.
So I'd be happy to go next. My name is Brandon Trujillo. I'm with the Wisconsin Technical College System, and I think I'd probably just echo what the others have said. In part of my past, I worked with the federal GI Bill, and I think students just not having an understanding of what will happen, what gets them into debt. I would see students who would receive the federal GI Bill receive all their housing stipend. I would see that they would be eligible for Pell Grants, and then they would still take out loans on top of that. So I think that students are not aware what they're getting themselves into, and are often getting misled. So I think having a Bill of Rights would be important. And then also, I would just like to say that having more opportunities for public loan for service, something maybe even similar to the federal GI Bill. If somebody's doing some sort of federal work, public service work, having those availabilities, the federal GI Bill has been very successful for a specific reason, and I think we could maybe even look to do something similar to that. So those are my quick thoughts.
This is Connie. Can you hear me? All right. So one of the things I do want to mention is that I know the financial aid directors, when students ask for loans, when they go in to get their loans that they're entitled to, the student loan administrators, the student loan staff in the colleges and universities will tell them that they don't need to take it all. And we've heard stories when State Treasurer Godlewski was heading up the task force and we were doing the listening sessions. We heard stories about kids who would say that, or the financial aid director said that, they'd tell the students, you don't need this much, you don't have to take it out. This will be a loan you'll have to repay. And some of the kids' reaction was, yeah, but with that money, I can buy a car. So I know that they talk to them about that. And they don't have time to go into, this is how much you end up paying over the lifetime. So that's a pretty big problem. And I have no idea how to address that.
Hi, this is Shannon Conlon. I'm with DOJ. I wasn't able to join the video portion. I apologize. But following up on what Ms. Hutchinson just said, I have a real world example of one way that they can do that. When I went to a admitted students weekend in Indiana for law school. And unlike my experience with UW Law School, which is where I ended up going, they had a mandatory session on financing where they explained what a loan payment is going to look like 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 years out, how much you borrow, what your loan is going to look like, your payment every month, and how much you will pay back on that loan over the life of the loan. That's something I can speak to personal experience UW did not do that was very, very beneficial to me and made me rethink whether I would go out of state versus in state based on how much I would have to borrow and pay back. So I agree. I echo what everyone's saying. I would like to see a lot more education and put some burden on universities and schools to really explain to these students what you're borrowing has to be paid back, and it's going to be paid back with interest, and what that's going to look like. So I echo everybody's sentiment.
This is Shane, and I'm actually an aid administrator. And to jump right on to Shannon's point about the lack of education that the schools are able to provide. UW-Madison, we're a very big school, so it's very hard to do kind of one-on-one. So just the idea of doing some sort of bigger, mass education, I think is missing. My background, while I'm at UW-Madison now, my background is a much smaller proprietary school, so the for-profit schools. And the issue there was really just the lack of options for students. So, they want to come and they want to get an education, but here's a loan. I mean, you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot more option that we can give to students in those cases. So I think some change needs to happen there.
That's a really good point. Maybe during their freshman year, all students could be required to have a class on finance that goes through not just finance, what happens when you take out loans, or some discussion of it when they have their orientation, not just for them, but for their parents. And I think a lot of parents don't know that students can take out more than what they need, because most kids who go to college are 18. Once they're 18, they get to make the decisions. The parents don't always have to be included in those decisions.
Absolutely. And this is Shannon again. One of the things that Indiana did that I thought was really, really enlightening is not just this is what your loan payment is, but this is what a typical mortgage looks like. This is what, not a typical, but I can't say it in, 1 minute what they did, but they had various examples of, let's say your mortgage is $1,000. And you've got childcare, and this is groceries, and they really laid it all out to say, let's look beyond just what your student loan payments are going to look like. Let's look at what adults have as everyday payments, because I think that those are experiences that 18-year-olds don't have. They don't understand what a mortgage costs and a car payment costs and daycare costs. And so they might say, okay, my loan payment's going to be $350 a month. I'm cool with that, without understanding that then they've got a mortgage and all these other payments. So I think it needs to be not just what the loan payment looks like, but a big picture financial wake-up call for what it's going to look like as they move forward.
If I could make one more comment, one of the things that, based on the other comments that are being made, and having any requirements that may be put on our institutions or on financial aid administrators, I would hope that the debt task force overall would take into consideration any sort of administrative burden that might be put on financial aid directors or our institutions in putting forward these requirements. I think it's very important. I think it's needed, but maybe funding behind it for our institutions to be able to do it, because I just feel our financial aid administrators are really overtaxed, and they have a difficult job. And so I just would like to just throw that out there, that I think we should take that under consideration as well.
I agree, Brandon. If they had the time to do it, they would be doing it. I want to throw an idea out there that I've been thinking about. I worked closely with State Treasurer Godlewski early on in this process. And interestingly enough, going to what are we doing about people with student debt who are already out of college, the state treasurer has the authority to do refinancing through the school trust fund. And that would be, the state treasurer is an independent financial entity. And they had an attorney general's opinion in 1976 that the state treasurer's office does have the authority to do this, which might be kind of a solution, because they would be able, the state treasurer's office would be able to do lower interest rates, but also get money back into the state treasurer's office, into the fund, not to the treasurer's office, but in the fund that might, that would increase the amount of money on the fund. So that might be an option that we should throw out there for consideration among all the other options that we have.
Absolutely.
Hey, Connie, that I agree with you. I think the one thing I'd just be a little careful about is just making sure the math works, right? Because I think that works. I think it works. I just want to make sure what we don't want to do is create another issue at the treasurer level. I'm just thinking through the math of, $1 million, but if there's 25% of defaults, right, the interest you're going to get isn't going to cover the default rate. So we just got to be careful about that. The other comment that I would make is on the education side. And Brandon, I totally agree with you, right? I mean, you throw the burden on you guys and then you don't fund it, doesn't make sense, right? So totally agree with that. There would have to be some funding there or some funding there. But I also think, you know, it's got to be multiple times, right? We got to hit them in high school too, right? Because if you start hitting them in college, it's already too late. They're already in that. And I know, you know, in high school and you know, this is juniors and seniors, right? They're half listening anyway. But you know, I think you got to hit them multiple times. You got to hit them in high school, hit them in college, keep on hitting them. And Shannon, that the way you described it is, I mean, that's great. I mean, that's perfect for what I'm thinking about. So anyway, go ahead.
If I can interject really quick, just for the sake of time here, we haven't had an opportunity. Austin Hammond, you didn't have an opportunity to weigh in yet. I wanted to make sure everybody got an equal opportunity to share, and I wanted to make a couple quick comments as well. Again, I don't mean to cut everybody short. Really good dialogue. We're in a really tough time crunch here. So, Austin, did you want to jump in? Was there anything you wanted to add to the conversation?
They have to
Yeah,
file
thank you. I apologize if it logged out earlier. I was having connectivity issues. So my experience
they
as
sue
a
the lender,
first generation
private
college
or,
student, was in the midst
or
of having
federal,
student debts
and
and
they
taking
sue
out
the
federal
lender,
loans, and something that I think needs to kind of be
that
looked into more
that
is like
currently
financial
they have no
literacy and just
current
making it
ability
more
to pay
upfront,
back
like
those
what we are
student
getting
loans.
ourselves into. Because
They
I
have to
recall like
prove
the little
that
meeting at the
going
beginning of
forward in
like
the future that their
senior year of like what that looks like.
Is everybody getting a lot of feedback?
change.
Is everybody
And then
getting
they
a lot of
also have
feedback?
to
If
prove that
you're
they've
not the
made
one
some
talking, can you
reasonable
please mute your
effort to
line?
pay back the student loans. So the big challenge is that second prong where
Can
they
you hear
have
me
to
now?
show that there's like certainty of that their circumstances won't change. So it's very difficult to discharge student loans. There was a case in New York that just came down that the judge, Cecilia Morris, lessened the stronghold of the Brunner test a little bit, and she actually.
The background noise was coming from Austin. Austin, do you have another window open? I'll share the link to the original call when we're done here. So if you have that open, you can leave that meeting.
Environmentally related and was making $35,000 a year.
Maybe could we?
Much less than he.
Austin, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep. And there's nothing coming in. That's perfect.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can you start that again? I remuted you by accident.
That was
Hit
just
the wrong button.
okay. I apologize. I was hearing both. That's why I commented. Is anyone else having issues earlier? So to start over, my experience is just being a first-time college student trying to kind of navigate through student debt and like what does that look like. Majoring in political science, and the dream is serve in the state legislature or federal someday. So it's a great honor to be part of this. Something that I just find that needs to be advocated for and is important is like financial literacy and making it more apparent to students of what they're getting themselves into. All I recall is a high school meeting that kind of went through it, and it just was confusing. And this was like me reflecting as a senior in high school. And through the couple of meetings we have had thus far, something that seems really tangible and realistic is the idea of borrower's bill of rights, like just to have like, this is what we're doing to protect you so you're not being taken advantage of. These are things that we can provide for you. It just seems like a real realistic avenue to pursue. I've been like looking into like different states' proposals over the last week or so. I believe it was the first meeting it was brought up, and I found it really interesting. So those are just a few of my thoughts on it. Just having more information up front for students, and from reflecting on the listening tour that Governor Evers and others went on, other students as well as myself, just kind of knowing what we're getting ourselves into, and having that two-way conversation that like the state has your back when you're going into this, navigating it and helping you to be the most successful that you can be. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Yeah, so just kind of a couple quick comments from me as well. I'm also an aided administrator, have been for over 20 years now at this point. I think one of the things I just want to make sure that the group considers is that these are very complex issues that likely don't have simple solutions. You know, when we talk about mandating that schools do things, I think it's important that we understand there are some very, very small schools with limited financial resources and limited staff resources. There are some really gigantic schools that simply can't conduct things in one-on-one components. So I think we really need to think about what is the impact and any recommendation we make on all school types and all student types. The other thing, I know there's a lot of discussion circling around on refinance. The one thing I want to point out as well is it's important to understand what can be refinanced in some of those plans, because part of the problem students are having right now, if you've listened to all the testimony and we hear on a daily basis, is I thought everything was sorted out, but it turns out that was only part of my loans. That was only my federally held loans, or that was only my state and private loans, or, you know, if they're not really able to consolidate in a true consolidated fashion into one loan that they're paying back, you're likely not necessarily fixing the underlying issue. And my fear of a refinancing program is if it's simply set up for people that have high credit scores that can take advantage of lower credit rate, lower interest rates, you're going to help a very small population that likely are not the people in distress. And if our goal is to help those in distress, I also want to make sure that we're looking at kind of these broader issues and how do we really center on that. So I know we're short on time. I think it's time for us to jump back to the main meeting. I've really appreciated this dialogue. I hope we get some more extensive time in future meetings to get a little more in depth. But thank you everybody for participating, and I'm glad everybody got an opportunity to at least make a few comments. So I think we're supposed to jump back in the main meeting now.
Thanks, everyone.
There's a link in the chat for the other meeting. Thank you, everyone.